Alright, so I just got done watching the finale to the Acolyte, and first off, I don't make Star Wars content. This is a first off type of video, so I'm gonna try and do my best here, but I basically am going to try and justify the Acolyte. Now, first off, I want to get my personal thoughts and opinions out there. First off, I do not think it was a good show. I would prefer this world existed and the Acolyte doesn't exist in this world. You got what I mean? But just from some perspectives and stuff, I think there is a path to where it makes sense. All right, that doesn't mean I like it. I just think there's a path to where it makes sense, right? And so I just got finished watching the finale. As you can see, I'm literally watching Star Wars Theory's like watch party. I wanted to see his reaction stuff. Big fan of Star Wars Theory, But yeah, another thing, major spoiler alert for anyone who hasn't seen the finale or who hasn't seen the show in general. So I'm just gonna get that out of the way now. So the rest is up to you if you want it to be spoiled. All right. So first off, right, the biggest issue with the Acolyte, even coming into the show, was that the whole gist of basically there has not been a Sith around for a long time, right? Like 100 years, more than that, a millennium. In fact, I'll throw the quote up right now by Ki-Adi-Mundi from The Phantom Menace right now. That's what he says, right? It was supposed to be a time of peace. There was not supposed to be anything going on, right? And so that was the biggest concern going into the Acolyte. If there's a Sith, if there's a bad guy, how are they going to make it to where that doesn't break canon, all right? And so basically the way that makes sense in the Acolyte, the way that that's covered up, right, is basically because at the very end, Venestra, or Greenhead lady, right, the Greenhead Jedi, basically she tells the Senate that this whole ordeal, all of these dead Jedis, these killings, this evil going on, was by this guy named Sol, right? If you watch the show, it's the Asian Jedi. He's the coolest motherfucker in the whole show. I'm gonna be honest. He's my favorite character. Basically, she says he turned fucking bonkers and killed all the Jedi to hide up the whole deal that he killed the mother of the two twins, right? And so if you haven't seen the show, you might not know what I'm talking about. Basically, there's these two twins. They had a witch mom, and this Jedi killed the witch mom because he thought the witch mom was trying to kill the kids, all right? So that's how it's not going to break canon, all right? So in my opinion, it's a fucking cop-out. Regardless, that's how it makes sense, right? So we can play that everyone's obnoxious, they're ignorant. Basically, right now, according to the Senate and most of the Jedi Council, it is still a time of peace. They had a rogue Jedi that went crazy and committed all these heinous acts, right? And so Ki-Adi-Mundi's thing right there, right, where he says the Sith have not been around for a millennium or whatever the quote is, makes sense, right? So that has not been broken. Now, the unfortunate thing is that Ki-Adi-Mundi was in the show, and basically I'm gonna get into all my issues with it at the end. My issues with the Acolyte, I'm gonna get to those at the end, all right? But yeah, so that's how it's supposed to make sense, right? And now the next thing that is doesn't really make sense. It may make sense, but it just doesn't, it ruins something, or some people think it ruins something, is the whole idea that these two twins, the main characters of the show, were created by the Force. They were made in a vergence of the Force. Now, does that ring a bell? Does that sound familiar to anybody? It should, because Anakin Skywalker was created by a vergence in the Force, right? He was created by the Force. That's why he's the chosen one, right? The whole Star Wars is about Anakin Skywalker. He is the chosen one. He is the one to bring balance to the Force. And then you have the sequels, which basically kind of fuck up all of that. And then you have this shit, which kind of fucks it up too. But regardless, the Star Wars main timeline is about Anakin Skywalker and how he's the chosen one. And he was created by the Force, which makes him the chosen one. So the issue that doesn't make sense with the Acolyte to many people is that these two twins were also created by the Force. Why aren't they the chosen ones, right? Why don't they become the people to bring balance to the Force, right? And basically, this is going to be a longer explanation, okay? So we gotta kind of get into the nitty-gritty of what this means. Basically, from what we know, this Mother Witch, right, from Clash Royale, Mother Witch, basically, she created a conscious, right? A conscious with the Force. So this vergence created this conscious, which was then split in two, which we're assuming she did on purpose. It didn't, we're assuming that didn't just happen. And so there were two people, twins, you would say. Basically, they're the exact same fucking person. They're the same person, but they are both created by the Force, so they're basically twins, right? It's kind of confusing, but you get what I mean. So before I get into why they are not the chosen ones, or why I think they wouldn't be the chosen ones, we do have to address the fact that in the very last episode of The Acolyte, we get a look at Darth Plagueis, which I'm assuming this is fucking Darth Plagueis. If it's not Darth Plagueis, I don't know who else you're supposed to think it is, right? But we see Darth Plagueis, and realistically, he is watching. He's watching over. If you know anything about Star Wars, you would know that Darth Plagueis is the master of Palpatine, right? Before Palpatine was, you know, all big bad and all this type of jazz, his master was Darth Plagueis, right? He's not been any, you know, in any live action Star Wars. There's a book about him, which is pretty good. I need to read it myself, you know, my bad. But basically, he is Palpatine's master. Now, why is Plagueis important? Plagueis is important because he basically made Anakin Skywalker. And if you know, would know in the fucking movie, in the Revenge of the Sith, Palpatine literally talks about Darth Plagueis, and he kind of talks about basically what happens with him, what he did. And so, long story short, Darth Plagueis wanted to create life. He wanted to create someone in the Force, right? And so, he tried to do that. He tried to figure out a way to create life. And what happened was, he tried to do that, and the Force basically was like, whoa, what the fuck are you doing, bro? Can you, like, chill? And then they didn't let him do that. Or the Force. The Force didn't let him do that. And instead, it rebounded and basically made Anakin Skywalker. It was like, you're trying to create this negative entity with the Force. That's not how this rolls, bro. The Force is a balance. It's a balance. It's just a balance, right? It was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Way too much negativity going on. Bad vibes over here. We're going to make the good of all good, right? And, you know, long story short, he wasn't the good of all good. He just did put it, you know, he brought balance to the Force at the end of the day, right? But that is Anakin Skywalker. That is how Anakin Skywalker was made. So Plagueis inadvertently made Anakin Skywalker. Now, why am I talking about this? Basically, Plagueis, being in the finale of the Acolyte, he sees this girl, right? This girl that is created in the Force. And, you know, we don't know for sure, but we can, you know, connect the dots and stuff and assume that Plagueis, having the power to even be able to attempt to try and make someone in the Force, probably knows that these two girls are made in the Force, or will eventually if there is, God forbid, a season 2 of the Acolyte. But basically, he knows that these girls are created in the Force. And so that's going to tell him that it's possible, right? That it's possible to do that. And so that's where the spark is probably going to come for him to be like, okay, let's try and do this. Yo, Palpatine, I got a little project for us, man. Let's try and, you know, fuck around, maybe create a fucking human being out of the Force, right? So that's how he gets the idea for that. Now, why is Anakin Skywalker the chosen one and the twins are not? Why is there a difference there, right? In my honest opinion, from what we know, the twins were made as just beings in the Force, right? There is this coven of witches that they're basically born to. We don't know exactly why the mom fucking decided to do this, but if I can, you know, maybe, you know, fill in the blank a little bit here and there with some of my own, you know, opinion, maybe the mama witch was basically like, I'm lonely, I want some kids, there's no men around here, you know, that's how, you know, that's how shit works. You're not going to be able to get kids if you don't got no men. Sorry about it. Regardless, she's like, okay, what can I do to get some kids? Let me just make them. Make them in the Force, right? No harm, no foul, right? The Force is like, okay, you know, we can live with that. You know, 2 kids, you know, you got them, man. They're going to be good. You know, you got it, you know, yada, yada. So the Force allows her to do that, right? Because she's not really trying to make the fucking Sauron of Star Wars, right? And so that's why they're not really the chosen ones in my eyes. And Anakin is the chosen one because Anakin was a response from the Force. The Force, it was a response because the Force is like, whoa, too much negativity over here from Darth Plagueis and Palpatine. We can't be having that. Let's make a, you know, something to combat that, basically. And that's why he is the chosen one. That's why it doesn't ruin Anakin. In my opinion, you know, maybe I'm coping. Who the fuck cares? This is what I'm, you know, this is my opinion, right? But the Force rebounds and makes Anakin. That's why Anakin is the chosen one. Because Anakin was made out of a response to evil to bring balance, right? He is the balance. In order, all this bad negativity stuff that was trying to be made, he was made to balance that. He is there to balance the Force, bring balance to the Force. That's what Star Wars is. That's why the 2 twins aren't the chosen ones, right? Because they weren't made as a response to something. Now, then again, we don't really know that much about it, but, you know, connect the dots, fill in the blanks. I think we kind of come to a conclusion that that might be the case, right? You know, I guess, maybe, sure. To my knowledge, that planet that the witches were at had no other life. They didn't have any spaceships. They were pretty fucked if they wanted to have kids. Realistically, they were fucked in the next 100 years. They all would have died or whatever. I don't know how the witches work or whatever. But yeah, that was a bit of a long, drawn-out explanation. That's why I believe Anakin is still the chosen one and is different than the twins being the chosen ones, while they're not the chosen ones, right? You know, kind of following along with what I mean. All right, now the last thing I want to talk about, which is probably going to be a big talking point for the next several months within the Star Wars community, is the fact that Yoda shows up at the very end of the Acolyte, right? Venestra, green-headed bitch, she comes and she's like, okay, yo, master, we got something to talk about. Basically, she figures out that one of her old pupil now is basically a Sith now, right? You know, it's just bad news bears, right? She's like, Yoda, please, you know, tell me what to do, man. You're the greatest ever. Help. Now, the reason why this doesn't make sense is because Yoda's the best. Yoda's the best. He's the greatest Jedi. He knows everything almost, right? He can sense, you know, turmoil in people. He can sense death, all this type of stuff. Literally, he sensed Order 66, right? He sensed that. He was on a planet from across the galaxy, the universe, from across space as a whole, and it was like, oh my god, what's just happened? There's been a imbalance in the Force. A bunch of my friends just died, and then he realizes and then kills the clone troopers behind him, right? So Master Yoda is pretty fucking powerful, right? Now the issue is, how does he not know? How does he not know that Venestra is lying to the Senate? He's probably about, well, I can't say what's going to happen between them two when they talk, because, you know, they haven't shown it. But realistically, how does Yoda not catch on to this sooner? There's a bunch of dead Jedi. There's a bunch of all that type of jazz, right? There's just something Yoda should know. If he's around, he should pick up on that, and he should, you know, handle it, per se. Not to mention the fact that if he does understand this, he probably realizes that the Sith are back, and then in Phantom Menace, he's not like, oh man, the Sith are back? What? No way, dude. But why does it make sense? Basically, if you would know, the same argument kind of comes from the first three movies. How does Yoda and the rest of the Jedi not understand that Palpatine is the Dark Lord? He is the big bad. How do they not understand that? He's right under their noses. How do they not figure that out, right? Basically, the Jedi Temple is built on an old Sith temple, I believe. It's a Sith structure of some sort. A pretty bad Sith thing. And that was to show, I believe it was to show the arrogance of the Jedi. That they were like, okay, this is fine. We're better than this. We're going to make our, like, centerpiece on top of this old Sith temple, right? And because of that, it clouded their judgment. They weren't able to see correctly. They weren't able to feel correctly. They weren't able to see that Palpatine was a Sith, right? So, pretty easy to, you know, connect the dots between what I'm about to say. Yoda couldn't understand what was going on because he was clouded by this temple. And not to mention that nothing had been happening for, you know, years on years. He was probably bored too. He's probably just like, oh, you know, I've been sleeping. I don't fucking know. Regardless, that is what I could say would make sense with Yoda not knowing what's been going on. Like, there's a Sith, there's dead Jedi, that stuff. The Sith temple, the aura, I know I pronounced that weird. The aura. It's weird saying that. I'm sorry. Of the Sith temple clouded his judgment, and his guard was probably down because nothing had happened for so long. He was like, oh, nothing is gonna happen, and he didn't really think twice about it, right? So that's not as, you know, supported, I'd say, of the other two things. I think the other two things I've, you know, explained kind of make sense, right? They make sense, you know, as much as you want to, like, you know, maybe hate it or not. They kind of make sense. This one, not as much, but at the end of the day, it does make sense. It could be a reason. Holy fuck, dude. I thought there was a person in my house. I'm home alone. I was about to go on full panic mode. Regardless, that's what I will say for why the Acolyte makes sense. Now, there's a lot of other stuff that kind of doesn't make sense, but I'm not going to get into that. Those are the three big things. The Sith not being around, why are the twins not the chosen ones and Anakin is, and how does Yoda not know what's going on?